There we go, Nick.
Amazing, thank you. So welcome everyone. I am delighted to welcome you to the session on unlocking the power of ex-military talent. We are joined today, I'm delighted to be joined today by three veterans. First of all, thank you for all that you did from a services perspective. I think that's right to say today, but also thank you for coming to talk to us on the call. So what we'll be doing today is we'll be unpacking their journey from military life into civilian life, and how that's kind of translated into financial services. We'll chat through perhaps three things really. So what are the many talents that veterans can bring to corporate life? How do we attract veterans into our industry? And how do we, once we've got them in there, be able to retain them, help and support them, helping businesses and colleagues thrive as well. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from the three that we have today. So let's just kick off with some introductions, if I may. So where did you serve, and just give us a bit of a kind of flavour of what the roles you did in the military. So if I hand to Rick first, would you give us an introduction?
Yeah, no problem. Hello everyone, and hopefully you enjoyed this session. So yeah, I'm Rick Clark. I work in Aldermore Bank in the CDO function as a data engineer. Been with Aldermore for 16 years now. While I was in the military, I joined when I was 17 back in 1987. And I did 11 years as an electronics engineer on radars in the Royal Air Force, and left in 1998. I didn't serve anywhere too glamorous. I was in Rutland for a while, Sealand near Chester, near Lincoln, supporting the Red Arrows who were stationed there at the time. Yeah, and left in 98 to pursue a different career from the electronics engineering that I was doing. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. Charles, do you want to go next?
Yeah, by all means. Good afternoon, everyone. So Charlie Moreton, I work as a PM in tech here at Aldermore. That's a lovely picture of me in my former job. So I spent 8 years in the Royal Navy, 3 of which I was a tactical officer on a submarine. And then the remains of my career was spent as a clearance diving officer and bomb disposal expert. So yeah, a fairly varied career. And then once I left, I sort of occupied various ops roles, and then more latterly project management roles in tech and the finance sector.
Amazing, thank you. And what a picture that is. But I'm more excited for the next one as well. So Daniel, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Reed. That's me in a former life where hair was a thing, almost 25 years ago now. So I was in the army. I joined in 1999 and left about 10 years ago. So I served just over 16 and a half years. The part of the army that I was in was called the Adjutant General's Course. So we dealt with financial management, human resource management, discipline processes, so on and so forth, at unit level. So when this photo was taken, I was with 29 Commando down in Plymouth. Also served with 3 para and 2 para through in Colchester, and some formation level units, so over in Germany and back in the UK. And I did a couple of operational tours, a couple of out to Iraq and also Afghanistan as well.
And just bring to life that picture from what you were telling.
Yeah, so this was, as I said earlier, with 29 Commando. So the 29 Commando was a Royal Artillery unit that supports the Commando Brigade. Every winter go across to Norway to complete the Arctic skiing survival course. So this particular photo was doing ice breaking drills. So this is where you deliberately ski into a hole cut in the ice wearing your backpack with your kit on. And the purpose of this is to learn to extract yourself from the ice, from the water. The temperature in there actually wasn't too bad. It was a little bit warmer than the outside temperature, which was about -30, -35, something like that. But when you come out the water, you need to roll yourself in the snow to get rid of all the excess water, and then run off to find your dry kit, which is probably the worst bit of the whole exercise. But good fun, good fun.
Well, I'm particularly enjoying that on the basis that I'm in a room that's like hotter than the sun at the moment. So the welcoming advice is interesting to me at the minute. But I definitely just a hats off to be able to do that, and some lessons in the event that anybody's going skiing over the period. There you go, Dan can help you safely retrieve yourself from the ice. Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that introduction. It's really interesting to kind of hear where you are and where you were. Can you talk to us a little bit about your journey from military into mortgages and financial services, and kind of what that kind of journey and experience was like? So, shall we go to Rick? Do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, I can do. I mean, my journey into mortgages was a bit of a convoluted one, because when I left the military in '98, I went to work at a software development company, and the first project I was on was working in the finance industry, doing a car motor finance platform. And then it was through various job opportunities over the coming years that I then ended up in Aldermore, and then as Aldermore expanded, because Aldermore started back in 2009 just with commercial mortgages, and then the other portfolios have come along over the time that I've been here. So I kind of didn't come directly into mortgages. It was kind of evolved to that way. So yeah, not a conscious decision as such. It's just where my destiny took me.
I think it's quite an interesting one, that one, isn't it? Because I think you probably speak to most people in our industry, and there's probably a similar story to that one. But we can perhaps unpack that a little bit later on.
Yeah.
Dan, from your perspective, what was your journey into financial services?
Yeah, so I think like Rick, I didn't sort of really have any sort of original intention, if you like, of becoming a mortgage broker. When I left the army, I was working in Gloucester. It's where we decided to stay. So the kind of the obvious route for me, if you like, was looking at project management. We've got some big employers around here, likes of GCHQ is just up the road for me. And that was a kind of a natural progression from the military planning world, into a civilian role, if you like. In the end, I submitted some applications, but the process was just taking forever. And in the meantime, a friend offered me a role with a company that was primarily looking at insurances back to military personnel. I needed to work, so took it on for probably just over a year or so. I was in that role, and I had to complete the CII qualifications to enable me to do it, with only the mortgage bit left before I was qualified to give mortgage advice. And I thought, why not do that last unit? So like Rick, really, I didn't really have that original intent to come into the mortgage world. It happened by chance, and it was a role that I found, and I found that I really enjoyed it. So looking back 10 years, I'm still here.
Awesome. And Charles?
So yeah, I absolutely echo what Dan and Rick have said. It definitely wasn't a straight line. So I originally, my first role from the military was with Amazon, and I was part of their military pathways scheme, and that actually put me into an ops role in logistics. So pretty far away from financial services. Interestingly, I had also done some qualifications for project management, and that was funded by the military. They give you a sort of pot of money when you leave to retrain, dependent on how long you've served. So I had every intention of being a PM, but ended up getting accepted with Amazon. So sort of went down the logistics route, and then worked my way into a PM role with Amazon before sort of jumping across into financial services as a PM, and then found myself at Aldermore. So yeah, definitely not a straight line, and but financial services is one of those things that I sort of looked at as I was leaving, but it was one of a sort of there's plenty of or lots of different opportunities and domains to go into, and I think that's sort of part of the challenge when you leave is trying to pick where you sort of want to spend your career.
And given military life, I can imagine, is significantly different to perhaps being in civvy world, what would you say is the toughest part of taking that sort of step out of the military and into kind of corporate world? What would be your sort of what were your experiences? What were the sort of toughest parts of that?
So I think the toughest part was definitely that initial first role, probably not helped by the fact that it was the pandemic, and everyone was ordering things on Amazon. So I sort of went into the role, and within about a week and a half we were in lockdown. I was running a night shift in a warehouse in Sunderland. So dealing with what was essentially kind of Christmas levels of parcels coming through the door. So I think getting to grips with the civilian workplace, which is obviously slightly different, but also coupled with those external pressures that move away from home and that base, which I suppose comes naturally to people in the forces because they've spent a lot of time away. But I don't think I was really prepared necessarily for not having maybe that support network that you get with being on a ship around you, and definitely 4 night shifts a week in the middle of a pandemic can be quite a lonely place. So yeah, I'd say that first hop was definitely the hardest, but it certainly got easier after that.
Cool. And Dan and Rick, do you want to come in on any of those in terms of the toughest part of it?
I think from sort of leading on from what Charles has said, for me, I think there's a degree of expectation both from the military person coming into into a new workplace, and also from the workplace, from the new civilian colleagues that you meet on day one, because I think everybody's got their own perceptions about how to conduct themselves. When you're in the military, you're almost your conduct is driven by, in my case, 16 odd years of experience. Being a certain rank within the military, you're expected to conduct yourself and to be in a certain way, and it's getting out and understanding what, little things like how can I talk to people, how should I talk to people, how do people talk to me. So it's very much sort of getting out and finding your feet. You need to get your feelers out and get your spidey senses going to sort of figure out what is this new game all about. But I think military people, they're used to moving roles, used to moving jobs every couple of years. So there is that experience, I suppose, of chopping and changing. But it's definitely a new environment for that service person coming into the civilian world.
Indeed. Rick, anything to add to that?
I mean, I think, but because I came out in '98, so that's like 27 years ago now, the whole the whole thing that we have now of trying to embrace veterans and the military as a whole in the workplace just wasn't there at that time. So when you came out, what I found was the hardest really was the fact, because nobody knew I was military other than the person that hired me. It wasn't a thing that I even considered bringing up anywhere. So, but coming from a unit, depending on how that unit is, so the last unit I was at, I was too far from home to commute every day. So you were staying in that unit throughout the week and then going home at weekends. You had a couple of thousand like-minded individuals that were there all of the time, day or night. It wasn't just a work thing, it was a social thing as well. And when you leave the military, all of a sudden that just stops, and there is a feeling of loneliness, I guess, for want of a better term, that you just don't have those people around anymore. And there was nothing in place then that any company I was going to was going to deal with. So you kind of had to deal with it yourself. And I think we'll touch on stuff later on where we're at now in the current climate that helps so much with that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. I think what I'm keen to sort of explore really is that the military values that you would have, you know, spent day in day out living by. So the sort of discipline, the resilience, the leadership, the adaptability has already been mentioned, you know, given that you are moving roles every couple of years and things. How has that had, what's had the biggest impact in terms of bringing that from that life into the corporate world? Dan, do you want to go with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I think you can look at leadership, obviously in Aldermore, in the business that I'm in. There's some brilliant leaders, there's some brilliant planners, there's guys doing good stuff kind of day in, day out, if you like. So I've looked at this as kind of what values did the military instill in me that I've now brought forward to the role that I'm doing now. And I think the main two are probably integrity and also a value called moral courage. So integrity is, you know, is your beliefs. It's doing the right thing, and that does trickle over to moral courage. That you are going to do the right thing. As a broker, I've had cases where it was maybe let's say a regulated buy-to-let case where if you say it's not going to work because it has to be regulated, and you know all the issues around doing that in terms of affordability and so on, and the next day you get a phone call to say, well, actually, I'm going to buy this place just as a standard buy-to-let now. You've got a question: is this really the right thing? So from my perspective, I've always been kind of down the line, if you like, with the clients and also the lenders. If I think something isn't quite right, I'll let the client know that I'm not comfortable with something. Similarly, I won't place a bit of business if I'm not 100% confident that what I'm submitting is actually the deal that I'm submitting and not something perhaps a little bit different. Obviously, other brokers are probably in exactly the same boat as me, but every now and again you hear of a client who has managed to place the deal somewhere, which does make you think, have they told the truth, or is the broker doing things as they should?
Wow. And Charles, from your perspective.
Yeah, so I'd say probably the bit that I've carried across that I found most useful is kind of the concept of what's known as servant leadership. It's probably slightly more referred to in the army, but it was definitely making its way through the Navy whilst I was serving. But it's the idea that you lead to serve those that you're in command of or that are under your leadership. So where I found it really useful is sort of stakeholders within complex projects. Once you start helping them actively, you start solving their problems, their issues, making, you know, their ability to deliver a lot easier, and helping them fix those problems and taking those problems seriously, not necessarily just saying, you know, when's it going to be ready and I'll catch up with you in a week's time. I found that really sort of helps engagement and kind of brings that project team together, and especially in a kind of matrix working organization where, you know, you might not be the line manager of the team that are working for you. Definitely going in with that attitude, I think, has really helped some of the deliveries that I've been on. So yeah, that would be probably my key takeaway: servant leadership.
Perfect. And Rick?
Yeah, I think for me, I agree with all of the things that have been said so far, but also the adaptability. While you're in the forces, whilst you have a speciality, and in my case, it was, you know, fixing radars and communication equipment, you're ultimately a soldier still, and you have to do that as a role. But then in addition, you get some quite unique opportunities to do things like I ran a motor club and we had a shop, and therefore I had to deal with the local motor factor to order equipment in and sell the parts in the shop at lunchtime and make sure that the books tallied. And although we weren't allowed to be a profit making, we couldn't be loss making either. So, you know, you had all of that stuff. And it just means that in the workplace, whenever I'm thrown into a situation that isn't what I normally do, it doesn't faze me whether I know it or not. I'll just get stuck in and I'll get under the skin of whatever that is and just deal with it. So I find that's, it's a helpful mindset to have.
Yeah, for sure. And I can see the motor club has come back to your house with you with many cats in the
Yeah, a little bit.
Very good. I mentioned at the beginning around looking into attracting and retaining. So two of the key principles of working in mortgages is about how we attract people into our industry and how do we retain them once they're in, or whether they're already in, to retain people. What can businesses do to attract veterans, do you think? Because we've already established on the call there was no sort of direct line into financial services, and it wasn't necessarily a career choice, a conscious career choice. And I think that's something that we suffer with across our industry anyway. We do need to do more of that, but particularly with the veterans. So we've got, one of the stats I was reading, there's like 15,000 veterans, people leaving the forces each year. So that's an amazing talent pool. What do you think businesses could do to kind of be more attractive to a veteran? Charles, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I suppose, I mean, I benefited, obviously Amazon isn't necessarily financial services, but I've definitely benefited from one of those transition schemes. I think you've got to be of a certain size to be able to justify that. But outside of that, as an option where there is a kind of predefined pathway, I think just offering the opportunity for either work experience or replacement, whatever you kind of want to term it, just to give veterans that insight into what's on offer. It's such a large industry, it's so varied, and then the roles within it are again very varied. So I think understanding that a veteran might not know what's on offer, but getting them onto the inside of a business so that they can see and then kind of make that decision. And that might just be a 3-week placement. And I know that there's the ability for guys that are coming out and girls, in that final terminal leave, you're allowed to, go and train or retrain or attend a placement. So yeah, I think if you're not geared up to have that kind of full-on career pathway, definitely just offering 1 to 3 weeks of experience can be really valuable and will help that individual make their mind up, expose them to that environment, the jobs, the domain, and then hopefully they pick financial services or mortgages as a future career.
And
I think leading on from that, if I may, Charles mentioned earlier, there's the pot of money there to help with training and so on, but there's also a pot of time that the service person has. So it's called graduated resettlement time. So you can put in leave to come and attend these events, and quite often that's supported by hotel bookings and so on as well. So it's really there's no cost to the potential employer. You've just got this guy. You don't need to worry about feeding, paying for that period of time. That's all taken care of from the military side.
I mean, what a great opportunity that is, right? So, to take, 1 to 3 weeks worth of somebody coming into your business, and maybe there's a key problem or challenge or something that you need to think about differently, to be able to bring those skills in, but effectively free of charge, to benefit from that, sort of activity, different perspective, different way of looking at things, different problem solving sort of skills that might come into it. I think there's a real sort of opportunity there for businesses to, to really sort of learn and gain that experience. And I think there's probably something we need to take away from this, to think about what's that wider opportunity across our industry, for sure. Rick, anything from your perspective?
I think from my perspective, I think it's probably just the employer being quite open to the fact that, depending on the role that was being done in the services, there's probably not an overlap in the financial services, and therefore not necessarily a preconceived idea of where you want to go with that. Somebody's unlikely to come out just thinking, oh yeah, I'd like to do underwriting. So if you're doing these kind of placements, it's a good idea to give a good flavour of what's available. So rather than just putting them into one place, and that may not be suitable. Just being able to distribute a bit and understand what is out there in the financial services would be good.
And I guess probably a little bit of demystifying the different roles that are available. I think that's what I'm sort of hearing really, is like how do we showcase the different things that are available and then find that route in.
Yeah, and then I think also from the service leavers point of view, there's an organisation called the Career Transition Partnership, which is that kind of holds the hand of the service leaver going through and is very good at signposting those organisations that will give support. And Charles mentioned people like Amazon, Barclays, so on and so forth. The big four accountancy firms are very good at leaning into that process. And I did a Google search last week for mortgages, mortgage brokers plus service leavers. And actually, it was nice to see that Just Mortgages on their website and their broker academy was referring to the Career Transition Partnership. And that's that stream of information that the service person will look toward. And that's why I think people, you kind of end up falling into that role, as we mentioned earlier, because you explore not necessarily a job in a particular field, but you might get exposure to a particular field. You then need to figure out, how on earth do I get a job in that field, which is a little bit different from, I like the idea of that, but how do I actually become the person doing that role? Yeah,
you're spot on. I've noticed there's a couple of bits just gone in the chat. Somebody's just commented most people fall into this career, just a small percentage come in willingly, which is great. But actually we do get a lot of people staying in the industry for a long time, so that, you know, even though you fall into it, I think, you know, sort of staying around in it. But one of the other parts that I wanted to just talk about was actually the experience of coming into the industry. How do we make sure that our veterans, once we've got them in, stay in? I mean, we're very fortunate that you three have, you know, managed to stay in it a long time. But what advice would you be giving to businesses that have employed somebody? Like, what additional support or what would you ask of those businesses to really make sure that they thrive? Oh, sorry, can somebody go on mute, please? We're getting some background. Sounds very interesting, whatever it is. Yeah, if you could pop on mute, can somebody find that, please, for me? Right. Go ahead. Who wants to answer that one? So retaining. So what would you be guiding businesses to do to help and support veterans?
I don't mind going first on that, whichever.
After you,
Rick. Yeah.
Okay. So I think for me, so referring back to what I was saying earlier, and the fact that when I came out, there was none of these kind of networks available, and the general feeling of being on your own and that loneliness. I'll let the others talk about what these mechanisms can offer, because I have no experience from them. But I would say from a mental health perspective, just letting them know that support is there too, not just from what you're going to do for a day job, but how you survive as a person in your own mind. And I know that Aldermore has all of that help available in the workplace from a mental health perspective. And I think, especially in this day and age, there's a lot of war and a lot of involvement in humanitarian activities that leave a much longer lasting effect on the individuals coming out of the services than they probably realise at the time. And therefore, that's kind of fairly critical to me, that support is known about.
Yeah, for sure.
I think from my perspective, I haven't thought about leaving the industry, but if I can give the example of somebody who I used to work with in the military who became a broker and didn't last more than about 5 to 6 months or so. And there's a comment in the chat there about a one-man band. How do you generate leads? And this was the issue that my former colleague had. So it's one thing getting into the industry and being qualified, but how do you then sustain your level of business to give you the opportunity to stay in the business? I was very fortunate in that when I joined Mortgage Brain is a huge player in the new build market now. So when I came in, I was given a number of new build sites, and that's an automatic client base, if you like. Um, my former colleague, he didn't have that. He got himself qualified. He then struggled to get CAS status because he wasn't writing enough business, and because he wasn't CAS, he wasn't then able to kind of branch out on his own, if you like. So it's a bit of a death by a thousand cuts. And in his example, it all just fell apart, and he left, and he went off to get a proper job, if you like. Especially given the setup where I'm paid by commissions. So what's that opportunity? What's that? It's that kind of getting people into the industry and then giving them the chance to bed in. It's that support of client bases, financial support over the first couple of months is very important as well. Yeah, it's difficult, I know, but I think from a broker perspective, I think that'd be quite key.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ongoing support through that. We'll touch back on mental health in a second, but that's very close to the industry's heart. And actually our next Lunch and Learn in January will be as part of Mimics of our mental health industry activity, and we're going to do a walk and talk instead of a lunch and learn, although you can carry a lunch along with you if you want, but a walk and talk in January to try and sort of instill some positive habits for mental health going forward. So that's something for all of us to look forward to. But just skipping back to that, Charles, was there anything you would like to add in terms of retaining?
Yeah, I think it's about setting those conditions for success. And I know I benefited in my first role. I was paired up with I had a mentor. In fact, it was actually my direct line manager was ex-forces, and that was part of the reason I was placed into that particular part of the business. And I think that really helps. Seeing people thriving in that commercial environment, it just gives you something to hold on to, something to kind of emulate as well, and also that support. They've been through that path as well, and they can kind of help you navigate that. So I think that's really kind of powerful. And if you've got a veterans network within your business, then that should absolutely be happening. If you do employ a veteran, the ability to pair them up and give them access to that network, I think is really key to sort of bed them in. And then I suppose slightly more formally, you can go through a process of getting endorsed in the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme. And I know Aldermore was awarded its silver accreditation this year. And I can drop the kind of website into the chat as well for anyone that's interested. But that's just more about setting conditions around sort of HR, the release of reservists to go and do their annual training, and then also a commitment to do some outreach and support the network. So I'll pop that in the chat, but absolutely sort of following that as well and gaining those accreditations will naturally make the workplace more sort of suitable or easier for veterans to navigate.
Excellent. And I know we absolutely endorse that from the Aldermore perspective, as you said. Thank you so much for sharing what you've shared so far. There are a couple of questions in the chat, so should we dive into a couple of those? In terms of are you required to train or get a degree or something similar before you leave the services? What does that look like?
Oh, sorry. That's my dog's kicking off. My eldest is just coming back in the house. Apologies. So you're not required to get a degree, but throughout the life of being in the military, there are some really good training opportunities. So as I said earlier, my area was HR management. So soldiers within my corps were offered qualifications around HR administration. If you're a vehicle mechanic, you can do MVQs in mechanic-y type stuff, whatever they get up to. And then when you're leaving, Charles mentioned this pot of money earlier. So you can there's money available each year to do smaller courses. I think the value when I left was about 175, 180 pounds per year. And you then get these things called enhanced learning credits. The enhanced learning credits are the big chunky ones, so they could pay for a degree course. But as you go through the transition process, if you want to go on, if you've got a particular area that you want to go into, like project management or vehicle mechanics or whatever it may be, this is where the career transition partnership can push you in a particular direction. And also, if you're looking at maybe officers who are leaving the forces, I did a thing called Staff College, and that mapped across a qualification to a level 7, so a master's equivalent qualification in strategic leadership and management. So there are opportunities throughout your career to do bits and pieces to do further education, but you're not actually required to get anything. Certainly when I was in, you weren't required to do a degree before leaving.
Interesting though that's that opportunity. So in terms of qualifications, you probably you might not have the experience, but you've probably got or certainly had exposure to different things that you could learn along the way, and that feeds back into the conversation about that sort of seeing the CV come in and seeing the sort of no experience, but you'll see the sort of skills and trying to think outside the box if you're recruiting at that point to say, do you know, the benefits and the qualities that bring not just the sort of qualifications part of it, but their values, all of that in the mix together, you know, should prove a strong candidate to then explore further within your business. Okay, we've got one from Edmund. Great insights from an employer perspective. Is there anything Aldermore, I'm going to substitute the word Aldermore for other lenders, other businesses on this one, could be doing better from a product perspective for veterans and those still serving?
I don't know. I think the products are fine. Where I've struggled with some service leavers are those lenders who won't consider a future job offer, because obviously we know that their position is going to change within a relatively small period of time. Some lenders are very good with job offers. Others aren't so much. Sometimes you need the first pay statement in the new role before the lender will consider it. So looking at the future role is always very useful. And also the deposit source quite often comes from a lump sum.
Okay.
As people leave the forces, because if they've reached their immediate pension point, they can receive a pension lump sum, and that's quite often used as a deposit.
Okay. Interesting. And anything else to add? Got one from Jim. I'm not sure if I understand the question, but let's try. Would you say you were representative of forces membership? Jim, if you want to come
Are we a valid cross section? Is that the question?
Is that the angle we were going with, Jim?
We're probably not. If we're sort of being brutally honest about it, and I would say I'm probably don't represent the average experience. I feel like I've benefited probably more than the average leaver. And I suppose what does the average veteran look like? Well, I think it's, they may not know what they want to do, and I think at least I knew roughly what skills I had an appreciation of what roles those might map into, but even that for some people, they're not necessarily going to know that as they leave. So yeah, that's where I'd say that early exposure whilst they're, you know, still in that terminal sort of period of their career with the forces is really valuable, because even if it's not financial services, they'll know it's not, but they might see a job whilst they're with you that they think, actually, I wouldn't mind doing that, but maybe just not in this domain. So you might not, you know, you yourselves as the business might not benefit, but it certainly just helps the individual sort of pick where they want to go, because you've kind of got a whole economy to look at when you leave, and it's pretty daunting, right? Because it's, you know, any domain you'd like to pursue, and possibly a skill set to go along with it. So yeah, that would be my takeaway.
Excellent. Conscious we are coming up to time. Anybody got any questions that they wanted to ask, please shout now or pop it into the chat. If I can't see any hands, so I'm going to go with no just for now. Anything that you did want to ask, pop it in the chat, and we can answer later on. I just wanted to say thank you. So it's really it's great insight into what I guess a corner of our society that we might be relatively untapped at this moment in terms of potential and skills that you can bring. So thank you for sort of shining a light on your experiences and shining a light on where we as businesses or as leaders can help and support more, and hopefully few opportunities to take advantage of this. I'm really keen on this whole kind of almost 18 months worth of notice period where you can tap into some fantastic brains and some fantastic knowledge and experience. So we'll definitely take that bit forward. So I will say thank you very much, Daniel, Rick, Charles. Super great to meet you. Thank you so much for today. We will be posting this onto Working in Mortgages website, so we will be sharing this around as well. So just once again, thank you for that. And then if I just signpost, I sort of did in the middle of that conversation, but the next Lunch and Learn, it's the 19th of January. It's going to be at 12:30. It's on mental health. As I said, we will be encouraging people to walk and talk during that call. So things about setting ourselves up for 2026 and that positive mental health perspective. In addition to that, Gemma Clark will be starting to take the lead on some of the Lunch and Learns for Working in Mortgages next year as well. So you'll see a little bit more of her and a little bit less of me. So I just want to say thank you very much. Wishing you a fantastic end to this year and a very happy and prosperous 2026. Take care. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you. Thanks.